This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Upgrade your business with Shopify, home of the #1 checkout on the planet. Shop Pay boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning fewer carts going abandoned and more sales going cha-ching. So if you're into growing your business, get a commerce platform that's ready to sell wherever your customers are. Visit shopify.com to upgrade your selling today.
Round the cauldron thrice we go, moving fast and moving slow. Potions bubble, candles burn, as the wheel begins to turn. Truth we seek and truth we know, embers of the fire glow. Spirit, join me in this space, join me in a warm embrace. Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me for this episode of Round the Cauldron. I'm your host, Megan, here to shed light on life as a modern Wiccan. This podcast is produced every Monday to bring knowledge of Wicca to those who seek it. Find me on Facebook and Instagram at Round the Cauldron, on Twitter at Round the Cauldron without the D, and at my website roundthecauldron.com, where you will also find show notes and links for each episode. If you like what you hear, feel free to leave me a review wherever you listen. You can also help support this podcast for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/roundthecauldron. Hey everyone, thank you for joining me for episode 7 of Round the Cauldron. Today we're going to be talking about the tools of the trade, the tools that we use in Wicca. Now first I want to say that depending on your tradition, all of these tools are optional. The most important tool that you have in your Wiccan arsenal is yourself. But we do use tools for different reasons. So most of the time, a tool is used as an extension of yourself. It's used as a way to direct your energy, to clear energy, and even to cut any sort of ritual items. So depending on your tradition and your specific type of witchcraft that you practice, your tools might be different. So I think I'm just going to go along this list that I made about the most common tools that we have in Wicca and go from there. So one of the most common things that we use in Wicca is called an athame, and you'll even see this in different shows and movies and stuff where there's witches. They have an athame. Traditionally, an athame is a double-sided, black-handled knife. Now, it might be sharp, but it's not used for cutting any physical objects. The athame is used as an extension of yourself in a way to direct and cut energy, mostly during casting your circle. And it's also used in consecration of libations or water or wine. It's dipped in the chalice because in most traditions of Wicca, the athame is a phallic symbol. It's a symbol of the god. And then it is dipped in the chalice, which is a symbol of the goddess and her womb. I'm not sure why traditionally it was black-handled. I can't answer that question. However, in modern times, I think it would be acceptable to use any sort of knife that you're comfortable with. Just make sure that it's not one that you would use to cut physical objects with. Now, here is an exception to this, because depending on your brand of witchcraft, this is going to be different. So, for example, if you are what people classify as a kitchen witch, you do most of your magic in the kitchen. It uses a lot of cooking and baking and herbs and vegetables and all kinds of stuff. Your athame might very well be one of your kitchen knives. That's perfectly fine. Like I said, the tradition is going to determine what and how these tools are used. Now, if you're like me and you practice by yourself, then that's also going to be different. I, myself, do not have an athame. Oh my gosh. You don't have an athame? You've been practicing this for more than 10 years. No, I don't have an athame. I don't find it, one, necessary. Two, I do have a child and a cat. And I don't think having a sharp double-sided knife anywhere in the vicinity is a very good idea. But that's just my personal preference. So take from that what you want. The next tool that I'm going to talk about is the boline. Now, the boline is also a ritual knife, but this is one that it is used to actually physically cut things. Most of the time it's going to be used to cut herbs or carve candles, physically cutting cords and ribbons and whatever you're using in your ritual at that or spell at that time. I think I've seen some now that the blade is actually curved. Dixie, quit! That's my microphone. Everybody, my cat's trying to say hi. But the boline is used to physically cut things. And I don't have one of those either. If I'm being quite honest, I actually don't have a lot of tools. And that's fine with me. Then we have the bell. Now the bell, for one, is just really pretty to have. I like bells. But their main purpose is clearing energy. Because we all know sounds have different frequencies. Different frequencies have different effects on the vibration and the energy that's in the room. So bells and even the Tibetan singing bowls and cymbals, those all use sound to clear the space of any residual energy, of any negative energy, just to sort of get it in a neutral space for whatever you're gonna do. Plus they sound really pretty. And then we've got candles. Every witch has candles, right? Yeah, every witch has candles. Candles in Wicca are used as representations of certain things. I know some people who have a different colored candle for each element. There's people who have a different colored candle for their deities. And then, of course, we have candles for the purpose of candle magic. I'm of the opinion that you can never have too many candles. However, I can't have scented candles in my house for allergy reasons, so that gets a little harder for me to find the very pretty and multicolored unscented candles. Probably gonna end up making my own. But anyways, I digress. Can never have too many candles. And for those of you too who are in a place where you can't actually burn a candle, like the first thing that comes to my mind is you're in a dorm room, like you are in college and you want to practice your faith, but you can't have fire in a dorm room. I think it's perfectly acceptable to have those little LED, I think they're LED, I don't know, the little candles that light up and use a battery. I think those are acceptable to have too. And then the candles also serve another purpose besides magic, but if you are placing things on your altar as a representation of the different elements, candles, of course, would be a representation of the element of fire. And then some people have a chalice, which is just a really fancy cup. The chalice it's a representation of the goddess and her womb and the source of creation, but it's also where you put your libations, where you put your offerings of water or wine. It's where you would create your, I don't want to say holy water because that sounds too Catholic, for my taste. But where you would consecrate your water for cleansing a space, for cleansing and consecrating your tools, and for even cleansing yourself. I haven't done it in a while. I haven't really had the time or the space or the mental capacity really to create my moon water. And then every morning and every night I would dip my fingers in the moon water and draw a pentacle on my forehead. Sometimes my daughter would participate too, just as a sort of protection going throughout the day and while I'm sleeping. And then we have another tool is the pestle and mortar. So not everybody is really going to need these. A pestle and mortar, for anybody that doesn't know, is like a little bowl that comes with I don't know how to describe it, like a crushing stick. It's where you would put your herbs, any spices, anything really that needs grinding. You put it in the bowl and you grind it up with your pestle and mortar. Then add it to your satchel, for sprinkling around your room. Whatever you're gonna do with the herbs, that's the way to go about grinding those things up and getting them into either a powder or as small as they can go. The next thing I'm going to talk about is incense. Again, in my home, I can't burn incense for allergy reasons, which makes me really sad because I love me some incense. But incense has been used for, oh God, hundreds of years in all kinds of spiritual practices, from Catholicism in the censer that the person swings back and forth, to temples, and even now people just burn incense for one because it smells really good. And in Wicca, the different scents and the different components that particular incense is made of, they all have their own correspondences, just like the colors and the herbs and things like that. Each one has its own specific use. On your altar, you can place the incense as a representation of the element of air, and then you can light it whenever you feel like it, or whenever a spell calls for it, or whenever a ritual calls for it as well. And then a lot of people also have statues, or figurines on their altar around their home. I'm not sure of any other purpose that these serve besides being a representation of particular deities or spirits or what have you. I have one little figurine that is a figure of the goddess, and it's my favorite, and I really, really like it. And she sits on my altar. I haven't found one for the god yet that I really like, but I think it's good to have these sort of figurines and statues just wherever you feel more comfortable, or wherever you feel most comfortable, just as a reminder of why you do this and what you believe. I think it's a good thing to have. And these don't have to be super big, they don't have to be super elaborate. You can make your own using salt dough or the clay that you can get from any craft store. They'll all mean something different to each person, and it's a very personal representation of any deity that you worship or you believe in. My cat just came running up the stairs or running in my room and stopped in the middle of the room and just stared at me. So that was strange. She's doing it again. She knows I'm talking about tools. She's gonna attack me. So then another really, really popular tool, I don't know, well, I guess it's a tool, is crystals. Everybody loves crystals. Even some people who don't really follow this path or don't really believe in the healing and spiritual properties of crystals love crystals. And I think it's really funny because I don't know if it's some sort of innate behavior for us as humans. Maybe it's just because they're pretty and sparkly and we're attracted to shiny things. Who knows? But crystals are really good to have if you have access to them, to keep them on your altar, to carry them with you. Each one has different properties and they're all used for different things. So if you're going to carry around a crystal, make sure that you know why you're doing it and what that particular crystal is good for spiritually. For example, clear quartz is a really good crystal for cleansing and clearing away negativity and negative energy. And it's also one of those crystals that is a good replacement, I guess, for any other crystal that you can't get your hands on. So like if you needed amethyst and you don't have any amethyst, you could use clear quartz because it's just an all-around good for everything crystal. I actually have a clear quartz in the shape of a heart. It's maybe about the size of a quarter, and I do like to carry that around with me in my pocket whenever I can remember to do so. And then we have the pentacle. The pentacle is most often placed on the altar as a representation of the element of earth, if I'm not mistaken. That's what I associate it with in my practice. But it is also a symbol that is used for protection. It's a symbol of our faith as Wiccans. And I actually have pentacle earrings, and I have a pentacle necklace, so I like to carry my pentacle with me everywhere. Then we also have the wand. A lot of Wiccans have a wand, and the wand is also used to direct energy during spell work, during ritual. It's just sort of an extension of yourself. So like if you don't have an athame but you have a wand, you can use the wand to direct the energy instead of the athame. And the wand is also an alternate representation of the element of air. And despite a lot of the pop culture out there, the wand is not the source of the witch's magic. We're not all Harry Potter and Hermione Granger. That's not how a wand actually works. And then with the wand, we have the staff. And the staff is sort of used for the same thing. Typically, a wand or a staff is made from a natural source, with wood being the most common. A lot of people like to make their own, and it can be decorated with, whatever you want. Crystals, herbs, ribbons, etc. And as far as I know, the wand actually evolved from the staff. So the staff came first, and then the wand came out of that as something shorter and sort of easier to handle. And then we have a besom. Besom? I don't. Everybody says it different. But a besom is essentially a ritual broom. So there's a lot of history that really surrounds the use of brooms in witchcraft, and most notably that is the witches flying on the broom. It's said that witches in medieval times would ride their broomstick through the fields, sort of jumping as they went in a ritualistic fashion to show the crops how high they needed to grow in order for them to be bountiful. It was also rumored that witches would create a flying ointment from several different hallucinogenic plants, rub it on the shaft of the broomstick, and then ride it. This exposed their genitalia to the hallucinogenic plants and allowed it essentially to enter the bloodstream and give them one hell of a trip. I don't recommend doing that. Please don't do that. It's not sanitary and it's not healthy. So the word besom literally means a broom made of twigs tied around a stick. In Wicca, the besom is used to ritually sweep a space to clear the energy in preparation for any magical working. It can also be used to ritually sweep a space anytime you feel that there's any sort of residual energy or negative energy that needs to be cleaned out of the place. Just sweep it out the door. The besom isn't traditionally placed on the altar, but it's used before and after to cleanse the space. It's also been said that you can use it as a decoration, and that however you choose to decorate with it, they all have different meanings. So, for example, it was said that a besom placed bristles up, over, or near a doorway was said to protect the house from negativity. So let me just go get my broom and do that, because we don't need negativity in my house. And then we have a cauldron, because you can't listen to the Around the Cauldron podcast and not talk about cauldrons. Along with a broom, the cauldron is an item that is most notably associated with witches and witchcraft. I think we've all basically had that image in our head at one point of an old woman gathered around a fire, stirring a cauldron and cackling while she casts her spell or makes a potion. And it reminds me of Macbeth, the Hag sisters, double, toil and trouble. It's not necessarily far off. I mean, we're not all old women. I mean, I'm fairly young myself. We don't all cackle, although I've been told that I have a really good witch's laugh whenever I am laughing really hard at something. But anyways, before the modern time and like the invention of the stove, cooking over an open fire is just something we did. For us witches, though, come here, Dixie. The cauldron's not just something that you make a meal in. It's closely associated with the divine feminine, for one, due to its shape, and for two, because it can be a center of creation. Oh, you can hear her purring. Dixie, you want to purr in the microphone? Oh, listen to my kitty. So in Wicca, we use the cauldron for making brews and potions and scrying, which is a form of divination. It can hold ingredients for spells, and it can be stop it! It can hold ingredients for spells, and it can be a safe space to burn ingredients, depending on what your cauldron's made out of. Normally it's made out of cast iron and stands on 3 legs with an arc-shaped handle. Historically, this made it good for hanging over an open fire, but it's still a useful piece of the cauldron today. The cauldron is closely tied to mythology, most notably Celtic mythology. There's the myth of the Celtic goddess Ceridwen, which involves her brewing a potion for her son for a year and a day. And then, depending on the size of the altar, the cauldron was traditionally placed in the center, off to the right, in the direction of the east. So the last thing that I want to talk about... Alright, Dixie, you gotta go. You're in the way, cat. Go over there. Oh, now I got cat hair in my mouth. The last thing that I really want to talk about as far as tools goes is the Book of Shadows. Some people call it a grimoire, some people call it a book of mirrors, and depending on your tradition, those 3 names can all have 3 different meanings. But a book of shadows is essentially whatever you want it to be. If you practice with a coven, the book of shadows is going to vary from either your own personal, what you think the tradition coven or the tradition book of shadows would look like versus the actual coven's book of shadows. But most Wiccans will use a book of shadows for one as a journal, to write about any spells they've done and their outcomes. They will write their beliefs, and they will put in the different sort of sacred texts that we use or that they resonate with, like the Wiccan Read, the Charge of the God, and the Charge of the Goddess. Those things can be included in the Book of Shadows. Correspondence lists, because we'll talk about this in a different episode, but correspondences can vary from person to person, from coven to coven, and from tradition to tradition. It's just going to depend. And then they can put in different herbs and their uses and meanings. any information that they want to include about the Sabbats, any information that they want to include about rituals and spell work and moon phases, and like basically it's just your whole witchy life in book form. Some people think that the Book of Shadows has to be handwritten. I disagree, because for one, not everybody can handwrite it. Some people have disabilities that prevent them from writing legibly. Some people have disabilities that prevent them from writing at all. And some people just don't want to write it all out, and that's all fine. A Book of Shadows can be handwritten. It can be typed and printed. It can be typed and stored electronically. Whatever works for you and makes it easiest for you to use and access is the way that your Book of Shadows should be done. Now, I will say this. Some covens require you to copy the Book of Shadows word for word in handwriting, in your own handwriting. Now, that's not to say that every coven is going to be that way. But from what I've found, that seems to be the case. Unless you're unable to do it, that might be what you're required to do if you're joining a coven. One final thing I want to say about tools in Wicca is they're useful, but they're not necessary. I think the only one that I would think is necessary would be a Book of Shadows. But again, that's all personal preference. The most important tool in Wicca is you and your connection with the divine, however that manifests for you. Don't get too hung up on going out and buying all of these tools and spending all kinds of money. I see people just spending insane amounts of money on all of these tools, and a lot of the times it's because they look cool, which is fine. I mean, if you're buying something because you think it's pretty and that it looks really cool, that's great. But you want to stick with the practical first. And I am of the belief that if you're going to get a tool, you should understand its uses, you should understand its history, and you should understand how it connects with your practice itself. Don't go out and buy things just for the aesthetic. I disagree with people that do that. So I hope you guys learned something today about the different tools that we use in Wicca. If there is a tool that you'd like for me to touch on, feel free to reach out to me. You can send me a message on Facebook. You can email me at roundthecauldron@gmail.com. You can DM me on Instagram. You can comment on this blog post, on this podcast episode. However you want to reach out to me, it's totally fine. I'll probably circle around and do another episode on tools again at a later date, just go more in depth on some of them. But for now, this is just a really short episode. I do have a little announcement before I sign off here. We are in the process of moving, so February is going to be a crazy month for us. So I'm not sure if I will be able to get episodes out every Monday in the month of February. I'm going to try my best. But if I don't, I will for sure shoot a message out on my blog, on my Facebook, and on my Twitter, and on my Instagram, and everywhere else, so that you know what's going on. And the episodes for the month of February will probably be a little shorter than I'd like them to be, just to sort of save time, because we have a lot to do this month to get ready to move everything into a new house. So, until next time, everyone. Bye! Please consider supporting this podcast through Patreon at patreon.com/roundthecauldron. For questions, comments, concerns, or suggestions, feel free to reach out to me through Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or email at roundthecauldron@gmail.com. The music you hear in the introduction and the outro is called Night Owl by Broke for Free. It's used under a Creative Commons Attribution license.